So we've gone through the piece creator. We've got our pieces created. As you can see, they're labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and G as per our piece creator naming convention. So the next step in the process is convert to ExactFlat. So we're going to click that button and we're going to automatically, it's going to go through, it's going to run a very quick flattening algorithm on all these pieces to give us our 2D pattern pieces. So it's done that now, so we're going to choose material for these, and I'm going to go from our automotive library since we're doing a car seat, and I'm going to pick a laminate for this car seat. So we'll flip over to pattern view and we can see our very quick pattern here. One new feature to Service Pack 3 is the ability to automatically remesh our part or create a new FEA mesh highly suited for ExactFlat on conversion. So right now I don't have that on. We can see the mesh here that was created by SolidWorks. It's got a very wide distribution of triangles in terms of size and shape. Some are a little more on the equilateral side, like this one right here. Some are a little more high aspect ratio, like this one. And I'm sure if we look around, we'll find some very tiny ones, or ones that are even very sliver-like this one right here. These don't work well for ExactFlat. We can flatten them, but it inflates the optimization time. So one of the new features we've done is the adaptive remesher. I'm just going to make this bigger here, and I'll zoom out so we can see everything. And what the adaptive remesher does is it's going to have a look at the topology of the mesh, and it's going to create a new finite element analysis mesh over top of the original, such that it preserves the detail and the fidelity of the object, but it dramatically reduces the triangle count, and it creates triangles that are all more or less equal in terms of size and aspect ratio. So we're going to start that now, and very quickly we're going to see a new mesh being created over top. It's actually done already, and just looking at the results we can see that we have a much better mesh here. They're all more or less equilateral triangles. They're not all perfect, they're not all the same size, but more importantly we've got a nice smooth gradation from large triangles to smaller triangles, and we're going to see this in areas of high detail where we need more triangles. It's always going to create a nice gradation from large planar surfaces or areas of low detail to areas of high detail such as curvature. So this is much better for ExactFlat. We've simplified the mesh, we've got fewer triangles and vertices, and it's going to solve much quicker when we go to optimize this. So as I was just mentioning, I'm going to click cancel here, and I'm going to regenerate my pattern. We do have the option to automatically remesh on convert now, and actually once this is done I'm going to revert the part and we'll reconvert it so you can see the difference. So I'm going to insert ExactFlat, revert to SolidWorks, and this is going to bring us back to the state before we click the convert button. So I'm going to go back to our options panel, I'm going to go to the conversion tab, and I'm going to turn on automatic remeshing. We can use either the legacy uniform remesher or the new adaptive remesher when automatically remeshing. We're going to do the demonstration with the adaptive remesher though. So we don't have the model view, pattern view, or flattener tab available anymore. We don't have a converted ExactFlat document at this point. So we're going to click the convert button. Excuse me. We're going to click the convert button again. And you can see the conversion process was much faster that time. We'll pick our automotive material again. And now when we go to the remesher or the flattener, our mesh is already automatically remeshed for us. So we've got a much better mesh here for optimization. So we're going to optimize this now really quickly. And we're almost done. And we're done optimizing already. So we'll click OK. It's going to update the ExactFlat pattern really quick. So we've got our optimized pattern here. So I'm going to quickly arrange these so all the pieces are related to one another. I'm just going to bring my move tool into view here. And I'm going to just arrange these so all the pieces are more or less oriented as they would be if they were going to be sewn together. And I'm going to use our find tool now, and it's going to automatically find the neighboring piece and orient it for me. There we go. And I'm just going to move these out a little bit more because they're a little crowded. There we go. Okay, so the next feature I'm going to show you is our edge labeling feature. And what this does is it's kind of similar to a notch or a notch chain, but it simply adds a text label on both sides of a seam that identify, depending on how you configure your edge label, you can create it to identify the seam type that you're creating. You can create your edge label so it's going to identify the piece name, or a user-defined name, or the probably the most important one we have is you can create your edge label as a combination of the name of your the piece name of the primary edge you've selected against the neighboring piece. So we're going to go have a look at the we're going to go to the pattern tab here, and we'll have a look at our edge labels. So I've got a few defined here already. I'm going to delete these and we'll create new ones. So I'm going to create a new edge label. This is just a user-defined tag to help you manage your edge labels. So I'm going to call it center, and we're going to choose an edge label type. So we've got three different types here. Edge type, this is going to create a label based off of the seam type that I choose. We've got pieces. This is going to generate an edge label based off of the piece names that are involved in that seam. And we've got edge names. So this is going to be an edge label that's generated based off of the user-defined edge name that we give to the seam. So we're going to create this based off of pieces because this is probably the most useful one. We're going to specify that the label starts in the center. We're not going to give it a tangent or a normal offset, and we're not going to place any kind of constraints on this. We're just simply going to create a label in the center. We do have a question about grain lines. Grain lines were introduced in Service Pack 2, I believe, and we can give a quick demonstration on that a little later on in this seminar. So right now we've got our edge label definition created here. We've turned on auto edge labels. So what this does is every single seam we create is going to receive this edge label definition. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a seam now. So we'll open up our seam PMP, and I'm going to add some edges to it. So we can see already that we've got a label created. On the left-hand side, it's C/B. On the right-hand side, it's B/C. So what this is telling me is that this piece is piece C, and it joins to piece B. And on the other side, it's telling me that this is piece B, joins to piece C. So we can verify that if we select this, and it's highlighted in the surface bodies folder. This is piece C, and over here we have piece B. So you can create and add as many edge labels as you want. You can specify them to start at the, let me just go back to my pattern tab here. So let this one, we can specify that the labels start at the start of the seam, the end of the seam, or the center of the seam. We have options to offset the label along the direction of the seam, that's the tangent offset, or we can offset it perpendicular to the seam. So that would be either in towards the center or out of the piece. So we're going to continue on here. And if we look at the actual seam itself, because we defined the default template in the options, that default was applied to the seam, so we can edit them on a per seam basis without changing our defaults, or we can even add additional or remove some labels from a seam, again, without changing the defaults. We've got a few questions coming in. I'm not going to answer all of them right now. We're going to finish the seminar, and once we're done doing the seminar, we'll take some time to answer some questions. So I'm not ignoring everyone. We're just going to get through the seminar first, just because I don't want to break it up too much. So please do submit your questions, and we'll get to them as soon as we're done the seminar. So the next thing we're going to cover is the 3D to 2D markings, which have been added to ExactFlat, and this gives you the ability to define hardware or markings on the 3D model. So we'll switch over to our model view. We can place points or lines on the 3D model using 3D sketches, and using ExactFlat we can translate that information from the 3D model to the 2D pattern. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a 3D sketch on here. This isn't actually a real-world example, unfortunately. It's going to be a little fictitious, but it should be good enough to illustrate what we're doing here. So I'm going to create some points on here, just in random locations, and this could represent, for automotive, it could represent attachment points for hardware. There might be snaps under the seat. For insulation, it could represent a label or a piece of Velcro if there's a port for inspection on the part. If there's an insulation cover, we can use these to represent Velcro, snaps, pretty much any kind of piece of hardware that can be represented by a point or a line or spline. These are all applicable too. So we'll create a few points there. I'll close my 3D sketch. I'll go over to the other side, and I'm going to create a spline on this one. We'll go to my sketch tab. So we're just going to create a spline on this here. We'll create some flowing geometry. So it's right on the surface. It's not planar. It's not linear. It's definitely has double curvature. And we'll go ahead and we'll close that. So we're going to choose our first sketch here. This is the points, and we're going to create some. We'll create some buttons out of this. We'll go back to the ExactFlat tab. We'll open up our hardware PMP. I'm going to target this piece here. And the reason why we have the target is because we can actually target multiple pieces for our hardwares and markings. So if we have a single sketch that spans multiple pieces, and a good example of this would be something like a pool safety cover that's been panelized into many long strips, you can create a grid pattern over it representing the locations of the straps that support the cover, and with one single marking you can apply that marking to every single strip of the safety pool cover. So we're going to target that piece. We're going to choose a hardware type. We'll do buttons. And we're good. We're going to choose our next 3D sketch. So this was our spline, and we're going to create some Velcro out of this. So again, hardware. We're going to target this piece over here, and we're going to create some Velcro. And now when we switch over to our pattern view, we've got our buttons over here and we've got our Velcro over here. I've actually got my pattern rotated 90 degrees from how it appears on the model view. So if we actually, there we go. So my pattern's laid out more or less like this. So we've got the spline on the left and the points on the right. And over here we have the spline on the left and the points on the right. So we've created hardware out of a 3D sketch on the model. We've translated that over to the pattern now. And because that was all done from the ExactFlat database, we also have the ability to use that information in ExactFlat's new costing module. So if we open up the costing module, we're on the excuse me, the fabric tab right now. So it's telling me that I've simply got my cost set to millimeters for some reason. It's telling me that we've used roughly just under 4,000 square millimeters of fabric here at a cost of about 1 cent per millimeter. So it's telling me I'm using about $38 of material here. If we switch over to our hardware tab, it's got the buttons that we created, the 5-point entities. Each button is 10 cents, so we've got 50 cents worth of buttons. And for our Velcro, we've got a cost of $2.50 per foot. We've got about 2 feet of Velcro, so we've got just under $5 of Velcro here. We can also export all this information to a comma separated value. I'm not going to actually do that right now because it's fairly dry, but it's going to export the material usage, hardware usage, the cost of the hardware, the cost of the material, and it's going to create a CSV for you, which you can then easily import into your own costing system. And you can set it up so to read whatever information you have. We're not going to force anyone to use ExactFlat's costing system. We'll simply generate a report that is useful, that can be imported into pretty much any other system. So that's about it for the new features to Service Pack 3. We did have one question earlier about grain lines. So again, grain lines are fairly simple. We'll just create a grain line on this piece right here. So we just simply create a line entity here. We'll close that and we can open up the grain line PMP. And from the grain line PMP, to actually define the grain line, there are a couple criteria. We can choose a straight linear edge. We can choose two reference points on a model. So I can choose these 2 points, for instance, and it will create a grain line out of those. Or I can clear this, or I can choose a line. Turn on sketches. I can choose a line segment from within a sketch, and that is now going to act as my grain line. We're going to choose the pieces that we're targeting, so I can choose just one piece, or I can choose multiple pieces, and now this grain line is going to be applied to all these pieces. So the highlight is actually very hard to see, so I'm going to select these pieces and make it stand out a bit more. So we've actually got a red highlight on here now. This is representing the grain line, and we can see it on all 3 pieces here. And if we go to our marker view, again, we can see that the grain line has been applied to all these 3 pieces here, whereas the other pieces have their default grain line that was created for them as soon as we converted. So I hope that answers your question about the grain lines. Please do send me another question if you have more detailed questions about the grain line, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm just reading the questions here. So we have one question here about leasing because the cost of ExactFlat is it's not the cheapest. So we do have leasing options. Please feel free to send an email to sales@exactflat.com, and our sales representative, Mark Jewell, he will be more than happy to provide you with pricing on leasing and different options for buying and using ExactFlat. So I'm just going to send you a quick note on that as well. So sales@exactflat.com. Oops, got a spelling error. F-L-A-T. So I'll send that to everyone, sales@exactflat.com. Please feel free to send us an email. We'd be more than happy to provide you with a quote for the software and give you, provide you with details on our different pricing models, because we do have more than one pricing model. So feel free to send an email to sales@exactflat.com. We'll be more than happy to get you that information. So we have a question here about tags for seams. Please feel free to send me, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for here. The edge labels, all the information in the edge labels is exported to our DXFs. So when you go to export that DXF, it will be there on a separate layer. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can assign it to a cutter, you can assign it to a pen. We're not going to limit you in any way with any of the information. The same goes for our hardware and markings and pretty much any other type of information that's exported from ExactFlat to a DXF. They're all put onto separate layers, so you can manage all that information fairly easily at your cutter by assigning it to different pens or different cutting tools, or you can just outright ignore it. The edge labels, we have another question about edge labels. Do they work with hems? Yes, they do work with hems. They do work with bound edges, although there's you'd probably want to offset that one a bit so they're more within the interior of the piece, but edge labels should work with all of our edge types: seams, hems, bound edges, and even raw edges. So does anyone have any other questions here? We do have a question here from any other questions? Okay, we've got a few more questions coming in here. So we've got a question about changing the shape of the piece. The best practice for doing this is if you're going to be changing your model shape at all, the best thing to do is to revert. So we can revert to ExactFlat here. And now it's pretty easy to change the shape. The reason I don't recommend, we do support changing it on the fly and having it updated, but a lot of the times, simply because of the way the piece creator will create bodies out of it and the way everything is working, we tend to get a lot of dangling features, a lot of geometry errors. So just as a best practice, it is best to revert your part first and roll back to before the piece creator, and then change your geometry from here. This way you're guaranteed that you're not going to encounter a lot of irrecoverable geometry errors as a result of the modification. I didn't actually model this piece. It was provided to us by one of our other application engineers. So I'm not actually sure what I can change on this without breaking the model. So unfortunately, I'd love to show you changing it and updating everything, but unfortunately, just because of the way it was modeled, I'm not sure what I can do safely without breaking it. So we've got a question about putting a botch at a given distance along a seam. I do apologize. I'm not exactly sure what, or perhaps he meant notch. Yes, we can put a notch at a given distance from a seam. My bad. I'm just going to reconvert here, and we'll do that real quick. So we'll go to our pattern here. You can see they look quite funky here. Again, that's simply because they're not optimized. We'll optimize it real quick. Okay. I do apologize. I think that was opened up on a second monitor of mine. So we've got the pieces optimized now. They look a lot better. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a manual notch on this piece here. I am going to, before I do that, actually, I'm going to create a seam out of this. So I'm going to open up my seam tool. I'll create a seam on there. And now I'm going to create a point on here that is going to represent my notch. And now I'm going to open up our notches PMP. So this is where we can add manual notches. And we'll choose this notch right here. So from here I can specify the distance along the seam from the start or the end. Actually, I'm just going to reverse my seam here. I want it to go the other way. So again, sometimes the seams are in the wrong order. Let's do there. P, select our point. There we go. So it applies to only single edges on a SOLIDWORKS model instead of our collection, our seam. So we can set it as a percentage distance, a set distance. So I can say I want this 50 millimeters from the start, and it's going to update my notch for me. Or I can do distance from the end, percentage. So we have a few different ways of specifying notches. Manually like this, and of course we can always just create single point entities along the edges of the pattern piece, and those point entities will act as our notches for us. So we've got a question here, can we show you how to mark for buckles with specific measurements? So again, we'll use our car seat example. This probably isn't the best example. I'm guessing that would probably be more for something like a bounce house or an insulation cover. But what we can do, we can easily create a sketch on the pattern. You can dimension it however you want. So we'll choose 50 by 100. And so long as you get the placement right on the pattern, again, we can do this in 3D if you prefer as well. You can create a 3D reference sketch dimensioned on the 3D model, and we can map it to the pattern using 3D to 2D markings, or we can create a sketch right on the 2D pattern piece. And then from here, we'll just close the sketch, and we'll go to our markings tool. It automatically targets the piece for us because the sketch was created in the context of this piece, and we can choose a marking. So ExactFlat by default provides a few different marking types, of course, because ExactFlat is database driven. You can remove these marking types, you can add your own, and you can really customize this to suit your needs. And we do have quite a few customers that have customized their database already, and they're quite happy with that actually. So we're going to choose just a random marking type, and we'll click OK. And we've got a marking type now. The markings don't show up in the costing module because there's no cost associated with them. But when we do export our DXF, this marking will be on the DXF on a marking layer. So we've got a question here, is there a cost calculation for seams? Currently, our costing module is for material and hardware only. So the cost reported, we'll open up the cost right here. So the cost under material, this does include the material used for seams, but we don't actually price out, we don't break out the seam allowance and cost that only. We don't have any kind of advanced routing, so going from machine to machine, from work center to work center, it's simply fabric and hardware costing. So we're going to give you the quantity of fabric that you've used, the cost of the fabric as defined in the database, and again we have provisions for specifying the currency that the material was purchased in. So if you're buying your material overseas in a foreign currency, or even on the same continent in a different currency, we will account for that as well. And in our options panel, I'll just go there real quick, costing, we can specify the default output currency. So right now by default it's set to US dollars. We can change this to one of many different currencies. And again, the conversion rates, they're all, you can specify the conversion rate for all of these currencies in the database as well. So we'll have a quick look at the database manager just to give everyone an idea of where these are specified. I'm going to connect to my sample database that I'm using, and we'll pull up our costing manager. So right here we have our list of currencies, and right now the conversion rate is set to 1 for all of them, but these can be changed to whatever value is desired for the time. Over here we've got our list of hardware, so we can specify the cost of each piece of hardware. We can specify how it's costed, so the button right now I have it set to 10 cents per each. I can set that to dozens, so it'll be 10 cents per dozen. For things like Velcro, we can specify that it's costed by centimeter or pretty much any other linear unit, and you can really specify or fine-tune your costing system. And of course we can specify the currency that each piece of hardware costs. Again, so if this is coming from another country, we can specify their currency and we can specify the cost in their currency, and that will be converted for you when you do your costing report. Same thing for fabric. We've got all our fabrics over here. We can specify how it's measured. We can specify the cost and the currency for it as well. So one of the questions was, can we specify US dollars per millimeter? And the answer is yes, we can specify that. I'll go to the cost manager again. So for material fabric costs, I was using our laminate. Where is it? PVC coated maybe. Nope, no, there we go, laminate. So I can specify instead of yards, millimeters, and in US dollars. So this would be a lot less, probably about 10 cents per millimeter, less, probably a cent a millimeter or so. So we have another question. Is there a recording of the webinar available? I did start recording this after I created the piece creator. So it's not a complete full recording, but we do have a recording showing how to do the adaptive remesher, the flattening. We covered the costing module. We covered 3D to 2D markings and all of the questions so far. So again, send an email to Mark at sales@exactflat.com, and if you request the recording of the webinar, he'll be able to get that to you, I think.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a problem with that.
we'll post it too. I think in a couple of days they'll be able to get it off our website.
Okay, yeah, in a couple of days we'll post it to our website, so you can watch it there, you can download it. I'll leave that up to them. But we do have a recording of the webinar, so that will be available to everyone. And I do believe we are scheduling other webinars as well. So if there were questions here, things you wanted to see that you didn't get to see, you can always sign up for another webinar, and we'll be doing the we'll be covering all these features again. Is there a way to check the time? How long will it take to sew one full seat? We don't have any kind of time estimator for how long it will take to sew the seat. There are a lot of variables involved with that, such as the type of seam that's being created, the type of material, the machines that are being used. So we haven't gone that route into labor costing, simply because there are so many variables that for us to get it right would be very difficult, just because of how many different variations there are. So no, we don't have any kind of way to estimate that. However, using our costing report and even our drawing tools, you can use our drawing tools. We will give you the length of all the seams and everything, and from there you could probably wouldn't be too hard to create an Excel spreadsheet and just come up with a fairly simple spreadsheet to estimate the time required to actually produce or sew the part together. And I know we do have a few customers that do that already, and that was one of our driving factors for creating the costing module the way we did, because they have these spreadsheets, they have these formulas that they've been evolving over the past 10, 20 years or more. We didn't want to make them switch over to our costing method exclusively, so we opted to simply create the costing report, which they can then use to feed into their existing spreadsheets and work with their existing established and trusted formulas. Okay, we have a bit of time left for a few more questions. If you have any questions, please do send them in. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. Oh, we just got one here. What are the next major enhancements planned? We don't have much of a plan yet. As Mark mentioned at the beginning of the video, our enhancements are based primarily off of customer requests. So we've just released the Service Pack 3. Not a lot of people have had a lot of time to play with it yet, but we do have a lot of requests from customers in the past that we're exploring. We haven't made any plan yet. So unfortunately, we can't really talk much about that. But if you have any specific features that you would like to see, again, please do email us. You can always email sales@exactflat.com. Again, that goes to Mark. Please let us know what you're interested in, what you would like to see in ExactFlat, and we'd be more than happy to discuss that with you and talk about including that feature into ExactFlat.
Yeah, I think the next meeting that we have is in September, where we meet as a group and we bring customer requests to our development team, and then we go through and basically we'll choose some of the features that have been most requested, and that'll go into the next service pack.
So we've got a question asking if all of the patterns are made automatically. Right now, ExactFlat will flatten and give you the 2D patterns from a 3D model. So things like pattern engineering, adding seams, adding hardware, that is not automatic. You do have to choose the collection of edges. I'm just going to close the database manager here. So when I bring up my seam PNP, the same applies to the hems, bound edges, and raw edges. I simply click a collection of edges here, and as I choose them on one side, the mates are automatically found and selected for me. So even though I was picking edges on this side, it's automatically finding the mates for me over here on the right. So we'll close the seam PNP and we'll just pan over a bit. So it added all the portions of seams over here. There's a bit right there and another bit right there. This pattern isn't laid out well, but it's automatic in a sense that it will find out the mates for you and automatically add the same seam allowance to the opposite side. If I add a notch chain, I'll just go back into my seam here and add a notch chain to this one. It's going to add the notches to both sides of the seam. So we'll turn on our notch chain here and we'll do 5 notches. So it's going to create 5 notches along the seam for me, and if we actually, oh, wrong button. Actually, I'm just going to move these a bit so they're oriented a little better. Sorry, just bear with me a minute here. There we go. Okay, so even though I selected and created my seam over here on this piece right here, it's created the same seam on the neighboring pieces, and we can see that I've got my notches all lined up across all 3 pieces of the neighboring piece as well. So it's automatic in the sense that it will find the neighboring pieces and apply the same seam or notches to them for you, but ultimately it is up to you to choose the collection of edges which define a seam and specify your seams that way. I hope that answered your question. So again, we've got another question about licensing. Please feel free to email Mark Jewell. His email address is sales@exactflat.com. Exactflat.com. He will be able to answer any questions you have about our pricing models or licensing the software. We do have leases available, or you can buy it outright. We've got different versions of the software that have different capabilities, so please do send him an email. He will be able to help you out. We do have, it's not a paper manual, but we do have online help resources. So you can go to our ExactFlat website, and it does tell you how to use a lot of these features on the help website. Unfortunately, it's not really written as how to use ExactFlat for automotive or insulation. It's more or less, these are the features, these are how they work. So it might not be the most clear, but we do offer training. And when you buy the software, we typically do sell training. I don't know if it's included. Mark would be able to answer you on that. But we do sell training. It's fairly cheap for what you get out of it. We can do online training through GoToMeeting like what we're doing now, or we can even go down to your office, or you can come to ours if you prefer. It's really up to you. But online training is the cheapest and the easiest, and we'll actually go through one of your projects, one of your files with you, so you can explain to us what you're trying to do, and we'll basically teach you how to use ExactFlat to work for you and your company and your needs. So we do have various options for training. So we've got a question about auto nesting here. So we can show that. We've got our car seat here. We're just plugging in our nesting dongle right now. We do license the Fraunhofer nesting technology, so we do have to have a dongle plugged in to use this. But manual nesting, traditionally you just drag them around. You can rotate them however you want. But we do have full automatic nesting too. So when I click the nest button, Fraunhofer is going to take over from here now, and it's going to pack these however tight it can, according to the constraints that I've specified. So constraints include things like lay rules, piece caps, edge buffers. We can specify a target yield or a target runtime. So there are quite a few configuration options for this. But it's pretty, once you have it set up, it's pretty easy. You just click the nest button and it's going to go ahead and start nesting. So I'm going to stop this. We don't really have a lot of pieces here, and I'll accept the solution. Close that. And my nest has been updated. Just see the extent. There we go. So I hope that answers your nesting or your question. If you have, if you want more information about auto nesting, again, please feel free to email Mark at sales@exactflat.com. And if you have more specific questions about that, or would even like to see an example with one of your files, I'm sure we can arrange that. So again, please feel free to email Mark with any questions about pricing, licensing, or if you wanted to see something more specific, and we'll be able to arrange something.
I guess that's basically it for the time. So Luke and I want to thank you very much for attending the seminar. As Luke said, feel free to send me any questions, sales@exactflat.com. We'll answer your questions if you have any that we haven't answered. And we'll be doing these seminars. I think there's a few more that will be coming out. If you want to see it, we've recorded, as Luke said, 90% has been recorded, and we'll be posting that to our website, and also we'll create some links that we can send out. So if you want a recording of the seminar, just send your request to sales@exactflat.com, and we'll arrange you to get a copy of the recording. At this time, I want to thank everyone. Thanks, Luke. Awesome job, as always. And we'll let everyone go, I guess.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.